just take a deep breath. We're going to have some fun. It's like,
okay, let's do it.
If you want to joke around. It's all good. And if you screw up, which I do all the time, it's not live, so we can edit and it's fine.
All right.
Welcome to this episode of Strata Originals Podcast. Today, I am excited to bring you Doug Larson, who is the president at XFD Real Estate Partners, but somehow that doesn't get all of it to me, Doug. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're so much more than just the president at XFD Real Estate. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, XFD is a owner-operator of student housing in the U.S. We run about 4,000 beds across the country right now and trying to grow. So a lot of the things we do is just looking at opportunities, looking at ways we can create value for our investors in student housing and try to operate these properties better.
So presumably the student housing is around the schools, right?
Yeah, as close as possible. Yep.
And by beds, do you mean beds in rooms, like they're individual rooms?
Oh, yeah. So that's just sort of our per pound metric in student housing. You know, in real estate, we talk about doors or units or beds, sometimes square footage. In student housing, we talk about beds.
Right. And that must be challenging sometimes for student housing. Fun to run those?
Can be, yeah, can be challenging. It's been probably one of the hottest asset classes in real estate for the last 20 years. In particular, the last two.
Why's that?
So I think it's recession resistant. It's a little bit disconnected from the broader economy. And people have just opened up the idea that it is an asset class that can fit their portfolio. So Blackstone made a big acquisition, taking out ACC a couple of years ago, and people have just been really hungry for exposure to the space. So it's been in a time when real estate's been a little bit out of favor because of the rising interest rates. It's stayed pretty hot.
So was there a concern during COVID with student housing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
universities were shutting down, so you probably one of the first things you do is get rid of your second home during a recession. And this is, if you're not going to go to class, you're not going to be attending that university, why would you pay rent? So it was definitely scary. As it turns out, people didn't like hanging out in their parents' basement that long, so they tended to return to campus, and even if they were remote, they tended to both pay the rent and be present, whether it was for clubs or social activities or whatnot, but they tended to return to their housing.
Was during that time when everybody was going to school online, was there a time you thought maybe that might change the game of student housing?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it's real possible that you could attend university anywhere. You could be going to a state school in the Midwest from Singapore via Zoom. So it was a real threat, but I think as it turns out, people don't really like attending meetings that much via Zoom. Some they still do, but actually enables the schools to get a little bigger because they can do their general electives or general education stuff more remotely, and then the labs and the more in person stuff that's required to be more in person can be done in person. So it changes the way the schools are done, but it doesn't really threaten student housing. I think it actually helps. Although, I guess one big change is we really need good internet at the properties, which 30 years ago wasn't really the case.
Yeah. So how long have you been in this business? Tell me a little bit about the history of the business.
Yeah, so it was a bootstrapped, like scattered site family business throughout the 80s when I was a kid growing up and watching my dad, uncle run our family business, which again was 2 flats, 3 flats, 4 flats, up into a relatively sizable portfolio in Champaign, Illinois, which is the home of the University of Illinois. And then they sold that business in 2004. I came in, took over the business, the remainder of the business in 2005. and kind of started building back 2008, 2009, and then in a more serious way from 2015 on. So that's in a nutshell. We developed a building in Champaign, a 428 bed building right in the heart of campus in 2015, 2016, and then sold it in 2018. And that helped launch XFD as more of a national platform.
Nice. So what was it that your dad and your uncle sold off? Like just the small.
It was about 842 beds of again scattered site like houses, duplexes. I think our largest building was 48 units at that time, but it was definitely like a mom and pop kind of operation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get into the family business then?
Well, in 2005, my dad passed away, and so I was living in Chicago at the time, and came back down to run the run the business. And it was again, it had just gotten quite a bit smaller, but I felt like I needed to come back and help my mom out and help the family get through that time. So sort of a shocking development. That was how it played out.
And so where did you start from? And is there any other family in your business?
Yeah, my mom and sister are still involved. My uncle was involved for a time, but he exited in 2010, 2011. But yeah, we're still involved in XFD.
And your mom is active?
Not really. She's in Florida playing a lot of tennis, but she gets the reports.
So, and your sister does what?
My sister does most of the design stuff. She picks out the furniture and she works with the architects and designers on making the properties look as good as they can.
Nice.
Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges in running student housing? Like you'd have to have a pretty good maintenance team. Like you have some crazy things happen, crazy parties, crazy anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest difference between student and conventional is the seasonal lease up. So you lose 70, 80% of your tenants every year. So you have to spend a lot of time um, every year pre-leasing for the fall. And if you miss the fall, you're really out of luck. Uh, so you're not going to get anybody to move in September, October, November. You do get a little bit of spring leasing, people coming back from a semester off or a semester away. But if you don't hit that lease up, you're going to have a problem. And yeah, there are a lot of parties. Every now and then, a kid will get drunk and like ram into a building. We had a property where a kid rammed into an air conditioning condenser, which then sprayed Freon everywhere and then caught on fire and burned up the side of a building. Luckily, no one was hurt. It's just something that I feel like doesn't happen quite as much in conventional.
Oh, for sure. Unless it's a stray car coming on the street.
Yeah.
And what would you say is the big differentiator between providers of student housing? Is it really more in the way you respond? Is it the quick response? Is it the safe environment? Like, what is it that differentiates you from other student housing?
Yeah. So I think there are different service levels for sure, different price points. There's been a bit of an amenities arms race when it comes to what's included in the common areas, whether it's like pool tables or golf simulators, saunas, gyms, swimming pools. There were certain a few years ago there was places putting lazy rivers, and really like the resort style stuff versus maybe like a hotel style product that might be closer to campus. We have some drive to campus properties we call cottage product, where it's just little cute little houses in the neighborhood, with a central clubhouse that might have your pool and your gym. So lots of different ways to do it. Yeah, I think for us, I think being responsive to requests from tenants is an important thing. Maybe a little more than the average owner, but if you go back in time, there's a lot of people that just didn't care. They wanted the rent and they weren't going to fix much, and they were going to probably steal the security deposit and not, and that wasn't, it was a successful strategy because the students didn't really know what they're getting into. So there's probably less of that going on these days, but probably still some.
Yeah. Yeah. So from a personal side, when it comes to real estate and student housing, what's your superpower?
uh, I dislike the superpower analogy. I feel like real estate is a pretty simple business, and if I were curing cancer or doing brain surgery, then I might say I have a superpower. But real estate is pretty simple, and we shouldn't try to make it more complicated than it is. So it's as I say, simple but hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
You
But
do have a knack for a thing or two. You do have a few things you're good at.
yeah, hopefully you can find opportunities to produce good returns for our investors and provide a good service for students that are trying to educate themselves and do both in a way that makes money.
And I think you also have an eye for underutilized areas too.
Yeah, we try to. I mean, I think if you fight for the same thing that everyone else wants, it's really difficult to achieve outsized returns or anything that's any different than just the average. Try to have an eye for something that is a little bit unique or has a little bit of hair on it that if it has a defect that you can solve, then that's great. That's kind of where we're headed, I think, as far as the companies try to pick up those opportunistic deals.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good for everybody, right? Everybody benefits.
Yeah, hopefully.
So it's interesting. So you're sort of surrounded by learning, right? You're a lifelong learner. You've recently learned a lot about yourself. You also read a lot of books. And tell me about your book strategy.
I was watching I think it was a Lex Friedman podcast, and there was a gentleman who had been working for AMD and Tesla and Apple. You know, his anecdote was, if when you get into management, most people in management have read a management book, and they all kind of work. He's like, so when he got into management, he read 20 of them, and he realized that he'd read probably 19 more than everyone else that he knew. He's like, when it comes to books, you have people that might spend 30 years in a career, and they write a book about their experience and distill all their knowledge into a book that you can read in about a week. And then there's also lists of the best books out there, so you can take the best of those 30 years of success, read them about a week, and they all kind of work. So I really season that strategy to try to just read as much as I can, read the best books I can, and try to gain a little bit of knowledge out of each one. So I enjoy that. I think it's certainly a better use of my time than sitting down and watching TV or what I used to do, which was reading Twitter or social media. So it's a strategy that I think you can transfer a lot of knowledge relatively fast.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, 30 years writing a book, somebody's life's work. You do 10
Yeah,
of those, that's 300 years of knowledge.
that's right. That's right.
Right.
A lot of it overlaps, but yeah.
Yeah, I tend to have the same view of mistakes. Life's too short to make all of the mistakes yourself. So I try to learn from other people's.
There you go. Yeah.
Right?
That's a good way to look at it.
Same kind of thing. I like your strategy because it's like somebody's life's work in 30 years and you can get through in a week. The question is only how much do you retain?
Yeah. Well, you can go back and reread them too.
True. That's true. I'm interested in your comment about real estate and what your knack is. It's kind of the art of identifying underutilized properties, I feel like. or underutilized spaces and areas. And is that just something you look at and you can sort of, you have this vision, or what happens when you do that? Because I'm spatially challenged, so I don't have that.
Mhm.
Born with that.
Yeah, I think sometimes, usually if something is for sale and it's not selling, there's a reason why. And if you can figure out that reason and you figure out how to solve that reason, then there could be some value to be created there. I can give you an example. We still own a property on the camp on Green Street in Champaign, uh, you know, uh, less than a 9 iron away from the center of campus, and it was a former um, office building that housed the student newspaper. It was for sale, wasn't selling because it couldn't be. There's only one office user on that location, which is university. They weren't going to lease the most of the building, and it looked difficult to convert to multi because at the time the zoning code required parking. The zoning code changed. We were able to add some a few units, put in an office tenant, and put in a few restaurant tenants. And then later the zoning changed again, where there's no parking allowed at all. So we just converted the rest of it to multi, and we still have it today. And so it's a main and main location. So that was a fun one that worked out well. Got a little bit lucky, but we also took advantage of some changes that enabled us to do what we wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of your investors must love you, though, because that's quite a skill to be able to do.
Love is a strong word, but yeah, I don't know. I think we've done well
Is it
by our
strong?
we've done as well as we could. I think we have a pretty good track record.
Okay. Really, really like it's just interesting because some of the things we try to do with our originals podcast is to impart knowledge to people as well as because everybody being unique in their own way has different ways of things that they do the best, and by talking about it other people can learn. I was just curious about that, and you have a very sort of organized brain, which I admire because of my ADHD. But even your happiness chart, when you did a sort of a self-learning or discovery session about your happiness, you even charted that, right? Normally you just go through and answer the questions, but you decided to put it on a graph, or what did you do?
So this was an exercise I've done through my YPO groups, called a lifeline. Basically, you just chart your happiness level and whatever scale you want to use, say 1 to 10, over time. Um, so sort of an XY plot, right? Um, so you're 5 years old, you're pretty happy. Say that's a 6 or a 7. Your grandma dies, you're at a 2. Then you make the high school basketball team and you're at an 8. Okay, so you chart your life out like that. I charted mine out, and I in a very nerdy fashion coded it into, or just typed it into Excel and made my chart. I had done it enough, whereas I thought that I had changed my chart. I was like, am I really being consistent here? And I also, just as a time saving measure, if I ever have to do this again, I can go back to what I just thought, sort of a journaling exercise to change my chart. But yeah, so I do try to keep notes in Excel and go back and use that as sort of as they say, a second brain. So you don't have to remember as much.
And you can almost see the common things that were happening in your life when you were happiest, when you were least happy, and
Yes.
you learn a lot about
Yeah.
yourself.
Mhm. Yeah. So for me, I mean, the things that made me, just certainly in my younger days, the most had the biggest impact were my relationship with women, or lack thereof. And then in maybe my more recent days, family and business, right? So if I've got a good event that happens at work, that leads to a lot of happiness. If children are born, um, that's a happy time. You go through a breakup, unhappy time. family member dies, unhappy time, right? So you kind of see how things
Yeah.
affect you over the course of your life.
Yeah. And it also forces you to think about all of the highs and lows in your life too,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
Hmm.
That's a scary exercise to me.
Uh,
It is a little bit. So you're a curious guy. And
for sure.
where do you think that comes from? I mean, I know you said you love to read, and your kids,
Yeah.
do your kids love to read too?
My daughter does. I have been working on the other two um, to make them readers, but I've got one reluctant reader and one 5-year-old who's not quite there yet.
Right.
But yeah, my daughter has read I think 14 books so far this year, so that makes me proud.
Nice. And
Um,
where does your curiosity come from?
I think to some extent that's just how you're born, right? Some people are builders, some people are runners. I think I'm a bit of a builder, and I have to partner with people that can actually execute. Maybe a little bit less curious, a little bit more practical. I like thinking things in a theoretical way and understanding how they work, and then have to bring in some doers to actually accomplish the task.
Yeah, that's always the challenge, right? You be
Yeah,
curious and come up with great ideas and find out how to do it, but you need somebody at the end of the day that knows how to do it.
that's right.
Just out of university, you were actually involved in real estate then too, weren't you?
Yeah, a little bit.
With a friend.
Yeah.
And you learned some, I think, some lessons maybe you could share with us about investors and partners and some of the early lessons that you learned, which was good that you learned them early on, but maybe you could just share those.
Well, I think it was just to me that was cut my teeth in both in a small way in real estate investment and partnership dynamics, which that one was a tough relationship. Just didn't get along after a while from a strategy perspective and an operations perspective, and certainly learned about things I didn't want to do again when it came to real estate. But it wasn't. It was a small bite, so I don't think it was one of those things you can recover from. But that's the kind of thing you can do when you're young,
Yeah.
um, and you have time to recover.
And you learn a lot about investment too, right?
I guess all investments, when you're being pitched an investment, they all look great from the pitch, and then you have to kind of go through and say, what does this really depend on, and how do I, if I can disprove that thesis, I can save some time and save my money.
So the big lesson out of that, would you say would be research and more research?
I think it's maybe, but I think it's try to be quick about disproving things that you think are, even if you think they're great, try to disprove them, and then if you can't, then it might be worth a little bit more exploration. But the probably the biggest lesson is make sure you research the people you're getting involved with,
Yeah.
and then make sure that even if they're good people, that they're a good fit for you. It's kind of like getting married. Um, you got to make sure that not only is it a good person that you're getting married to, it's a good person for you for a long time.
Yeah. Some of us learn that the hard way
Yes, we do.
again and again. Um, Doug, what would you say is your biggest lesson learned, like overall, to the point where you are today? If you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self, I know you're not that old, but if we go back to 16 or 18 or whatever, what would that piece of advice look like?
I think it would be very diligent about the people you get involved with, and be organized. Probably those two things. I'm maybe not naturally the most organized person, but I've worked hard to keep myself organized. And then again, the great people produce great results. And again, if it's a fit for you, and bad people really kill you.
It's true in
It's
so many aspects of our lives.
Yeah, for sure.
I think back to when I was 18 and what I would tell myself, and it would fill volumes, probably. You know what I mean? Like there's just,
Yeah, for sure.
because if we actually think about, when we look at different aspects of our lives, from our family life to our personal lives to our business lives, but it really all comes down to how we deal with people. Okay, I'm going to ask you this last question because you've read so many books. And I think our world is expanded by reading, because I also love to. So if you were to have your own late night talk show, who would be your first guest and what would you want to talk to them about?
Ooh. Unfortunately, he died a number of years ago, but I really like Christopher Hitchens. He was such a fascinating person. He's an English polemicist, writer. I think he wrote for the Atlantic. But a fascinating person, fascinating life. He unfortunately died of cancer in like 2011. But
and what would you want to talk to him about? His writing?
well, he was a bit of a polymath. So, I mean, he would talk about Israel, Gaza. He would talk about religion. He would talk about domestic politics. He would talk about, the conflict in Northern Ireland. What else? He had geopolitics, domestic politics, social issues, all kinds of stuff that I think it would be a pretty interesting conversation.
So it's
I
like
wouldn't have to ask. I wouldn't have to talk too much, I guess is the point.
20 guests all rolled into one guy.
That's right.
Cool. That's great. Anyway, Doug, it's been a pleasure, and we'll be hearing more from you. So I look forward to it.
Great. Thank you, Leanne.
Thanks for being here.